And one of the most surprising films for me for this year, and it's not necessarily a genre film, mind you, but for me, it ended up striking that chord for me, especially as we head towards the third act of Mope. Seeing it at Cinepocalypse in Chicago, it really blew me away as part of the midnight screening. Now, why midnight screenings can be limiting, it doesn't change the fact that the film is exceptionally powerful. Based on the tragic and true story of the man known as Steve Driver, if I am correct, and that was portrayed by Nathan Stewart-Jarrett, and Kelly Sear, I want to say is his last name, who portrays his best friend, Tom Dong. The story of Mope talks about these two low-level porn actors who start off at the bottom and have big dreams that during this narrative of comedy, drama, and later on tragedy has been a huge hit and is going to be playing more festivals as we move into the fall, but it played Sundance, and we'll talk more about that with the trio that is going to join us in just a second. Besides the aspect of Sundance, it's played Molitist International Film Festival in the Ukraine. It has played BIFF in South Korea, and it has played Cinepocalypse in Chicago. And we are honored to bring here in the bunker in Blairstown, here in Scratching the Surface, first, a returning guest to here. It's been quite a few years. The last time we talked was about Sushi Girl, one of my favorite films. And on this project, Mr. Kern Saxton is a producer and editor for Mope. Kern, how you doing? And welcome back to Scratching the Surface.
How you doing, Jay? Thanks for having me. It's good to be back.
It's great to have you back, my friend. And we know the love we have for Sushi Girl that will never be denied. In fact, I have a tattoo over my heart, you know? So, we also welcome to the program the man who I had a chance to meet actually at Cinepocalypse and really kind of spearhead this effort going forward, Mr. Kelly Hayes, producer extraordinaire on Mope. Kelly, how you doing?
Hey, Jay, I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Exactly. The pleasure is mine, though, Kelly, and it's great to finally connect with you here on Scratching the Surface, especially after getting to know you a little bit and talking with you to a great deal at Cinepocalypse about Mope. And finally, without further ado, he is the writer, he is the director, Mr. Lucas Heyne. Lucas, how you doing?
I'm great. Thanks for having me on.
Pleasure is mine, my friend. And we've talked off air about how much I love this film. In fact, I've talked to just about everyone about the love I have for Mope. And in Horror Hound coming up for the first half of 2019, it's my second favorite film from the first half of 2019. And it just...
Thank you.
You're most welcome. And it just blew me away. And I think Kelly will attest to this at the end of the screening. I think I lost my voice with all the questions that I had by the time I was done. Because, you know, Kern will attest to this. You know, I have a lot of questions about a lot of things when it comes to projects, especially that I hold dear and that I love. And Mope, the tragic story of Steve Driver, again, low-end, low-tier porn star who gets into this business, but even before that, a troubled youth who turned into a man who was influenced by porn and wanted to be a porn star. He wanted to be the best porn star. And that's really kind of the genesis of the story for Mope. But there's so much more layers to it, as we'll talk about. So let's kick it off first with you, Kelly, because I've had the most to talk with you. How did you get involved with Mope from the start?
So I had developed a TV show with Lucas a few years before we had started getting into Mope, and just we had hit it off. I love his writing. I liked working with him on the development side a lot, and he just sent me an email one day and said, I have this project. You want to take a look at it? And I said, definitely. And I read the script. I didn't know what to think of it at first, but I knew that I loved it. And on reading it a second time, I knew that he had something special here and that I would do anything to be involved.
Wow. And Lucas, to you, I mean, this project obviously is based on tragic real events, but where did your connection to this project start?
I had read some articles about it like years after it happened, and I was able to meet the writer of an LA Weekly article, and Mike Albo, and he has a history in the industry. He used to be an editor for Hustler, and he just knows a lot of people. So when he wrote his LA Weekly article, he talked to all the real people.
Right.
Steve Driver's dad, the real Eric Jover, Eric Long, Chris Rochelle, and so he linked me up with those people. And so then once I met them, you know, they sort of kind of let me into their world after I gained their trust. And it was this, you know, surreal world. Like, you know, I've been to dozens of sets, and I know these people, and that's kind of what gave me this insight in this crazy world. Because the more I learned about it, the more fascinating I found it.
And Kern, for you,
Luke and I met through mutual friends, and he had seen Sushi Girl, and obviously he was a fan. And when he started talking about this script years before I read it, and when he first told me that he was working on it, well, maybe it wasn't years, maybe it was like a year. When he first told me that he was doing a project about this, I remembered seeing the news footage of the standoff, and I remember that I was that was all over TV in LA when it happened, and so immediately I was like, oh, I got to know what this is all about, And then he gave it to me, when it was ready, and I read it and I said, you got to let me cut this thing, you got to let me be involved, man. This is really, it's a really interesting project because it, the things that it says about the society that we live in, not just about the story of Steve Driver.
Right.
And he was like, yeah, of course, I would love to have you cut it. So, and I became a producer because I'd gotten it set up through at a company, and we had gotten a deal because I didn't want him. I don't know how much you know about the production of the movie, but Luke basically raised all the money himself.
Did not know that. Wow.
And so I said to him, look, we could make sure you get your money back. And so I got a negative pickup deal for the movie that was more than what we spent on it. But unfortunately, regime changes happened and all that stuff, and so that didn't work out. But I stayed on board as a producer because I had to help bring it to the screen, and it was obviously been a really incredible experience. So.
Let me ask across the board here, and Lucas, I'll go first to you. What made Steve Driver such a fascinating and charismatic and later on tragic character?
I think that when I first started researching him, I kind of see so much of him in so many people in LA.
Okay.
It's, LA is all about people dreaming impossible dreams. And I sympathize with people who have the delusional dreams and this self-belief. And as I researched him more, I got to know people who knew him. He's sad because he couldn't see the truth. He had mental illnesses.
Right.
But there were so many times that he could have got help, and the system wasn't in place to help him. So of course he found the porn industry, and during this time period there was a lot of work that required tons of guys, like bukkake scenes, gangbangs.
Right.
So pretty much as long as you had a STD test, you could get work.
Wow.
And so basically he kind of was able to get into porn only because of that. But he interpreted it as it's the beginning of a long career. It's like somebody getting cast in background work on Bones and thinking that you're going to somehow transition into being Tom Cruise.
Right.
But if you in LA, his attitudes, those kind of attitudes are extremely common, not just in the adult film industry, like everywhere. And so I just knew people like him. Like I know lots of people like him still. It's just definitely a common personality type. And the question is, who can accept failure and who can't? He couldn't.
No, he couldn't. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's before I jump to Kelly and Kern on this, but it's interesting reading up on Steve Driver or Stephen Hill. I think he's still here. The point being is that there was a lot of aspects that led up to this, including why he was on house arrest. Maxing out his credit cards to watch porn. And as the scene is brought up, the dinner scene with his father, all the jobs, all the careers, all the ambition that he wanted to do all these different things, and porn was just seen as just another step and another job, just like being an astronaut. And that really does cater to the mental illness, which, Kelly, I'll go over to you, which I had brought up at the Q&A about how the portrayal of mental illness, and especially working in the field, really was very respectful, because this is a lot of what happens when people who have mental illness, people who have disabilities, they're given everything to succeed. And then they're say, you can be whatever you want to, and it's not necessarily the truth. And in the case of Steve Driver, it really wasn't the truth, and he lived with this illusion. But what made Steve Driver such a character?
For me, and this I got out of the script right away, was he just really couldn't get out of his own way. And by that I mean he had so many bad ideas.
Right.
And while this is not a comedy, the situations that he had put himself in, and he had put Tom in, and just kind of the thought that this was how I'm going to achieve fortune and fame.
Right.
Was going and being a porn star, whereas you're not very good looking, you're not well endowed, you're not the typical guy yeah, right. You're not the typical guy they're looking for as a male star. Yet, as Lucas was talking about, dreaming can be a harsh reality if you believe your dreams are true instead of trying to make them true. So for me, what made Steve interesting was just how he just kind of bumbled his way through, because I come from a comedy background. In a dark way, I just kind of thought that this was funny, and equally funny and sad. And that really made the character of Steve Driver jump off the page at me and want to see how it's going to turn out.
Was that a lot of what you see in the film, he left a suicide note in his car that was recovered by LAPD, so I was able to get a hold of it, and it's 18 pages handwritten. And a lot of the ideas and stuff he says are direct lines from his note.
Right.
And so things that might seem outlandish, where he thinks that he's going to get a girlfriend by becoming a porn star, is absolutely what he believed. He wanted love and companionship, and because of his various factors, he had never really had a meaningful relationship with a woman, which as he got older, got weirder and weirder. So he believed that women would watch porn scenes, and they would see him as value as a human being, and then want to date him and have a romantic relationship.
Kern, to you, what about Steve, especially coming from an editorial perspective?
Well, I think Steve, for me, really represented a greater problem in society right now, which is tethered to the whole idea of celebrity, and also what I kind of term as the corruption of the American dream, where there's like generations of kids now being taught they can do whatever they put their mind to, and if they don't have the skills necessary to turn those dreams into reality, they can short circuit. And yes, he had narcissistic personality disorder, he's mentally ill, but he is an extreme case of what I think is very common today. Especially, when you've got things like, dare I say, the influencer market, where people don't really do anything, and they expect to be famous, and the more we go down that rabbit hole, the further away we get from the idea of opportunity and hard work is what made this country great. And so for me, when I read that final, the ending, I was just floored, because it said everything that I've been just it's kind of frustrating, because we are all like the character Steve Driver, the person Steve Driver, like he did terrible things.
Yeah.
In one regard, it's hard to make that character sympathetic, but at the same time, we all have dreams, and especially in the entertainment industry, we're all working towards the goal. We're all trying to scale that mountain. And so there's a certain bizarre kinship that you feel with him, which I think is what makes the first, half of the movie really, really pop, where you're like, oh, like you're optimistic with him. You're not. It is funny. It is ridiculous, because he is over the top, and the things that he says are ridiculous and over the top. But at the same time, there's a grain of truth to it that you yourself can identify with. He's a dreamer, So for me, that's what really hooked me.
And it's interesting you talk about the first half of the movie, because a lot of people, when I talk about Mope, since the screening in Chicago, and also it's played Boston Underground as well in the first half of 2019, it's such a balance of comedy, drama, and then horror. And each of the acts, why things overlap, each of the acts represent particular focuses. You know, the first act is very comedic. I mean, you can start with the bukkake scene right at the beginning, and the tension that's built with that red light and everyone staring. It feels like some sort of experiment, but then you see what's going on and how they get together, and it's comedic, and it's kind of heartfelt, and you connect to them, Kern, as you had said. And then the drama builds into the second act, where that relationship and their dreams are developed and then tested, and then leads into the third act, where things fall apart, and it becomes very horrific to see that not only was this reality, but this fantastical world, has something that is absolutely terrifying beyond the fact of some of the sexual acts that were probably going on there. So there is a lot going on with it. But Lucas, to you, the research that went into this, I mean, from just the first few minutes of hearing what you're saying, you dug deep, and you went as deep as you could, and no doubt there was probably some dark stuff that you unraveled. So talk about the research when it came to being a part of the writing process.
I basically made a commitment early on to understand everything that I was depicting,
right?
Because I feel like, when you see something that just isn't true, you can feel it. And so it was a lot. The first time I saw one of these sets where like Eric is getting kicked in the balls, like it was fairly shocking.
Right.
And quickly I saw the kind of benign environment it is, where it's just this kind of casual, everyone's very casual about what they're doing. They're so enshrouded in this like bubble of their world that they see nothing shocking about it. And so probably the most intense aspect of research was actually taking the lead actors, Nathan and Kelly, to an actual bukkake set.
Wow.
And they got to see what it was like. And it was intense. Like, there was one thing that I really wish I could have put in the movie that wasn't which I thought it just said more about this world. There were probably 30 guys there, and they only had to pay for 20 guys.
Wow.
So when you would complete, you would get a ticket. And if you didn't get a ticket in the first 20, you wouldn't get paid. And so they were all like scrambling to pop first so they could get paid.
Jesus.
But we ended up using a lot of those same actors in the opening scene, and the location we shot it at is the real spot. And then the director of that scene, Jim Lane, also directed Steve and Tom in real life. So
wow.
It was basically trying to cast real people as much as possible.
Make it as authentic.
Yeah, there were multiple people who knew Steve that when we were shooting that scene, and just a quick little aside, for when we shot that scene, because the guys had been to a real one, and when we staged it, the tone was like completely different. Like when the real one, everyone was like having a great time, smoking pot. They were all getting along. There was no bad vibes in that room. But when we shot the fake one, it was like it was like an apocalyptic tone on set. Like the crew was kind of freaked out. The real guys were showing up, and they were like totally confused by the fact that they had to that they weren't doing this for real, because they were getting paid more to be in this movie than they were to shoot porno. And they kept asking us,
these guys 5 times.
They kept asking us, do we need to be tested for this? Do we need to be tested for this? And we're like, no, you're not doing it for real. And they're like, what's the point of that?
Wow. Okay.
There was a guy there named Jim Legman who was like, he walked up to me, he's like, my name's Jim Legman. I just want you to know I love women's feet. And that's what these guys are like. They're the bathroom there's like no door on the bathroom essentially. And
wow,
this place was just, the crew had to, definitely, it was an intense experience for the crew, because it's very little of that is production design, because it's what it looks like.
Right.
And I had the whole opening sequence, like where Jim, the director, comes out and says, "Are you ready?" That wasn't in the script until about a week before I shot it.
Right.
Because I saw him do that one time, and I was like, "Wow, this is crazy." And then the red light thing was based upon something I heard they used to have, where all the mopes would wait in there until the green light. And back in the early 2000s, some of these things would have like 100 mopes.
Holy
it was a huge ordeal. Yeah, there's a whole, like, they would get robbed. Like, one of Jim's shoots was robbed by a mope that put on a ski mask and robbed it. But everyone knew who he was.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Well, needless to say, the most interesting day of shooting that I think I've ever had, and I've been on sets a lot of days.
Right.
I think to what the guys were saying is having them there really made it feel authentic in the opening scene, you know? So
that's a really interesting dynamic, because such a fantastical world has truth to it. And to build an authenticity, you wonder if people actually believe that that's authentic or if that's creative license. I mean, has that been something that has been addressed in the screenings or with critics, that, you know, it feels too fantastical to be real with everything happening?
100%. I try to do it. I think it's one of the main things we're going to do with the marketing of the film is certain people, if someone misinterprets the film, you know, it's usually because they don't realize that it's really a very accurate look at the world. And so, yeah, I try to tell people how realistic it is, because a lot of the choices I made are towards just telling an accurate story. Like, there's scenes that are just, you know, if you were trying to make the audience like have a great time, they're not scenes I would have put in. So that's definitely a big part of it, is trying to explain. I always try to begin every screening with saying, this is a very accurate, true story. I had all this accurate.
Right.
You understand it's very upsetting, but it's what happened.
Kern, let me throw over to you real quick. I mean, is this for you the craziest editorial assignment you've ever had?
One of them, yeah. I mean, it was pretty crazy. Not just in its content, but also in the fact that, like, we shot about 2.5 hours worth of solid movie in 15 days.
Wow.
And had to figure out how to pare it down to about 145. It was, you know, there's a lot of stuff that no one's ever going to see that's, you know, really kind of blurs the line between, you know, art and pornography. But it's all in the name of realism. And I think, you know, the key for us was to make sure that we weren't glorifying, you know, that we weren't glorifying it, that we weren't glamorizing it, that we were making it as realistic as we could, but also, because it's such a bizarre story, it does dip into surrealism at times, and so I think it's so very interesting, because it's that fine line that it kind of teeters between, and it kind of gets crazier and crazier as you go along, and as it gets darker and darker, but it's all true. It all happened in some form or another, and you know, we just wanted to make sure that we were being true to the truth.
You know what, Kelly, let me throw over to you. You know, you submit the film for festivals. And again, folks who are listening right now on Scratching the Surface on SoundCloud, we'll get into the castings. We'll get more into the things that go on. But to get a call from Sundance and say, we want your film, especially a film that is as challenging and fantastical and true as this. I mean, what's the thoughts, Kelly, when you get the acceptance?
Well, first of all, the first thought that I had was when he said, this is Sundance calling, and congratulations, we'd like to invite you. The first thought was, oh my God, I can't believe that somebody actually, this is the greatest phone call I've ever gotten in my life. And I just wanted to share it with the rest of the team, and I couldn't wait to do that. So the phone call came in, and it's just like, okay, be cool, you know, but you really want to yell out, hell yeah.
You, Kelly, you didn't go, this is bigger than the Super Bowl. This is bigger than the World Series, like they do in the beginning of the film.
Well, didn't they say something that like if you can't tell anyone, if you tell anyone, we can revoke it?
Right, exactly. No, I'm talking about just to you guys saying that. So, go ahead, Kelly. My apologies.
But no, I think as far as the acceptance into Sundance goes, and basically any other festival that it's played, and we're very proud of all the ones, but at Sundance, they really took a shot at it because it's a midnight movie,
right?
For sure. But I think in the current climate, there's a lot of challenges in there. You know, how are we portraying women and
right
and things like that. So my hat's off to the programmers at Sundance for standing up and taking a chance on a movie. You know, we didn't have sales agents or PR people attached, sending in kind of the traditional way that you would get into Sundance is, you know, you're a bigger movie that has a big team behind it, making a push to get you in. We were basically a blind submission that Mope got in on its merits as a film instead of having some powerhouses behind it, you know, in a way greasing the wheels. So I think that all of us are very proud about how that worked out. Sundance.
Go ahead.
We were working on the movie for, you know, we had shot it at the tail end of 2016, and we knew, since, you know, our budget was low and we really had no one to tell us what to do, we wanted to take our time and get it done the right way. And so we spent, you know, 2017 and a large portion of 2018 really refining the cut, and it paid off. You know, like I think getting into Sundance was sort of the ultimate validation that we were making the right choices.